What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, the People's Podcaster, Scott Weatherly, and I'm joined by the Mancunian monster, Chris Phelps. Chris, how you doing? You all right?
What an intro, mate. Really, I am doing really well. I cannot wait to get into this.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something special. You and I are both sort of a big wrestling fans from way back, and I did a bit of a poll, actually. This came from a poll I did just out of sort of random to see which WrestleMania people were sort of like, if I was going to talk about one, which one I should talk about. And inexplicably, WrestleMania 14 came out top. So today, you and I are going to chat about 1998's WrestleMania 14.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Yeah, it's a bit of a doozy. So what? But let's talk about wrestling first. So you are a fan. You've been a fan for some time.
Yeah. So I'm a couple of years older than you, Scott. I'm like 41 now. I remember watching the Saturday afternoon stuff on ITV. So you had like Dickie Davies, Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks. I used to get really involved in that. Like, oh my God, can he defeat and knock? All he used to do is just try and knock Giant Haystacks over. He went on for like 15 minutes. The matches were absolutely terrible. The Shirley Crabtree. But then I remember they started throwing in snippets of this American wrestling, and I remember seeing like Hulk Hogan. And obviously, being a Rocky fan, I knew him from Thunder Lips and Rocky, but he'd never been accessible. And around about the early 90s, at 89, 90, we got like our first Sky Dish. And I remember getting into it. And I also remember going away on holiday to Talaka in Wales. And it was split, wasn't this? You had Sky and then you had BSB. And B had on like sort of an American territory wrestling. And there was a bit, I never forget it was a guy who looked like Kerry Von Erich, Texas Tornado. And he wasn't. And there was a big guy was splashing him off the top rope, and it was like the old Batman 66, stay tuned for next week's episode. I'm like, no, and I never found out. But from that moment on, I was hooked, and I got the Top Trumps cards with like Hogan, Warrior. Like Hogan and Warrior were the two like infinite, the best of all of them, that era. And then I remember a friend of mine had WrestleMania 7 and Royal Rumble 91. He got them like at the end of 91 when they were both out. It was obviously Royal Rumble first and WrestleMania 7. And I remember like seeing the Warrior v Macho Man and that. And in the Royal Rumble, a Warrior loses I actually watched it the other day, but Warrior loses the match to Sergeant Slaughter because King Macho Man cracks him with his stave thing and all that, like the staff he has. I never forget it. It was a retirement match, and I remember being absolutely in it. And from that moment on, Scott, because from like say 91 up to 98, wrestling was my life. Like we used to go on the German sports channel and record WrestleMania because we wouldn't pay for the pay-per-view. So at WrestleMania 8, Hogan v Sid Justice. And I remember Papa Shango come in, obviously the Godfather and stuff like that. And I remember Warrior had not been in it for a year. Warrior was my favourite at the time. Even though my gamer tag is Hulkamania 78, and it has been for like nearly 15 years. Sorry, I'm off on one here, aren't I? Sorry. But
go for it. Keep going. It's great.
I remember me and my brother watching it, and these German commentators going, yes, Hogan, and all this stuff. We couldn't understand it. And you could hear like Vince McMahon or Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain in the background talking, but you could hear the German commentary over it. And we watched it the next day. I remember saying to my brother, we just need the Ultimate Warrior. He's going to come back. My brother's going, no, he's not. And I was, WrestleMania 8, I was like 13 then, 92. And I remember his music coming on, and it was the longest fucking run to the ring I've ever seen, because I remember Papa Shango kept looking over his shoulders to say, come on, Jim, are you there yet? The Warrior. Do you know? And honestly...
Is this the one where he gets to the ring and he's clearly already blown up and he's sort of like
and he'd lost about 40 pounds of muscle because there was the big steroid thing in the background with him and Hogan, who was supposed to be testifying against Vince McMahon. So he'd been out of the game, and they were trying to show that WWE wasn't. There WWF wasn't full of drug cheats or all this stuff. And I'm not going to go down that route, obviously, but they all came back deflated. Like when Hogan went to WCW, he was clearly a deflated man, shall we say. But anyway, that is where I got into wrestling, and it's stuck with me since then, like for over 30 years, pretty much.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because it shows, like you say, the passion that these things can generate in people. Because it's one of those that sort of like I'm like you, sort of like I sort of got into it when you're quite young, and you just get like swept up in it, and this sort of contest of these sort of like these big sort of burly like oiled up men, and sort of like you're just like it should be weird. Do you know what I mean? It should be like this is weird, like, but it's not. You get one. I just loved all the gimmicks, like those late '80s gimmicks, early '90s. Like, I thought some of them were amazing. I was I liked Hogan, I loved Savage, but like Big Boss Man, Ted DiBiase, like the $1 Million Man.
Oh, I love DiBiase, love him.
All that, yeah. But then you get into like you got Sergeant Slaughter, like coming down to the ring with his sort of with his stick and his his drill sergeant hat and all that kind of stuff. I loved all the sort of like the pomp and pageantry of it, but then you got like even like the really weird ones when they had like the Mountie and
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Rougeau, he's a Rougeau brother, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I watched him in a Royal Rumble 91. This was literally yesterday. He was like, they had the main event, which was Warrior v Sergeant Slaughter. And then for some reason, I thought they were the first. I sort of fast forwarded some of the bits. And this match was on. I thought, oh, these must be the first two entries Royal Rumble. But no, it was the Mountie v Coco Beware. And I'm like, oh my God, it was absolutely woeful. The Mountie won by using his electric staff thing he used to use.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. And I remember people like the Repo Man was obviously Crush out of not Crush, Smash out of Demolition. Barry, what's his name? Not Barry Windham. I can't remember his bloody name now, but he was there. There was people like, do you ever remember? What was he called? Skinner, the guy who lived in like the Everglades of America. He had like a snake.
Oh, I remember. Yes, yeah.
People like that, like proper shit ones, and they bring them out, won't they? Like we had Doink the Clown. Doink the Clown had about 8 different variations, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was.
Well, that was it. That's what I used to love, like you say, because it was clear, like at that point, like Vince and the writing team were just like, no, gimmicks are the thing. And like you say, when you look into it and you find out that these are guys that have clearly been like working the territories and have like a history of being like a really good worker. And they get to the WWF, they think, oh, that's it, I'm up to the big times now, I'm going to make some money. And they go, no, we're going to dress you as a Mountie, and, I don't care what you've done before, we're going to dress you as a Mountie, and that's your gimmick. You're like, oh, it's crazy.
Do you ever remember SummerSlam 91 when the Mountie went against Big Boss Man? Because Big Boss Man was always a baddie up to this point, and then he'd lost loads of weight. Because I had a video, Saturday night's main event, and the main event was, because it was, I said this when me and Dave did our No Holds Barred review, it was Big Boss Man against Hulk Hogan in a steel cage, but Zeus comes down to the ring, Tiny Lister, Tony Tiny Lister, and Boss Man's there, and he's like, he's bigger than what he was, because originally he was going to be a jobber, wasn't he, the Boss Man?
Yeah.
But because he was so good, they were like, hang on, we need to elevate him. He's too good to be just someone who jobs for like the main wrestlers and stuff.
Yeah, I sort of love. I was a big Big Boss Man fan. I used to love it. I mean, was it the Undertaker? He hung in a cage match as well at one point.
Yeah, he did. What I was getting to, sorry, was SummerSlam 91 was the Mountie v the Big Boss Man, and at the end of it, the Big Boss Man takes the Mountie down, but the Mountie ends up in jail, and you get like 3 or 4 blokes around him as if to say, "Oh, hello, big boy," like one of them. Like, what the fuck? And the Big Boss Man I watched actually, Scott, around this time, because this was just before the Big Show came into it, like the Giant from WCW, was when he went to the Big Show's dad's funeral, and the Big Show's got leather pants on. Have you ever seen that at the graveside?
I think I have. It rings a bell.
He's driving the Bluesmobile. He's driving the Blues Brothers car, the Big Boss Man, and he's there. And then they're at his dad's grave with a hearse. And the next minute, the Big Boss Man chains up the actual coffin and drives off, and he falls off in the graveyard. The Big Show. Oh, it's utterly fucking nonsense, but I love every minute of it.
That's what I loved it. I mean, it's the fact that, like, as a kid, like there was always a part of me that knew that it wasn't 100% legit, because there was this thing where they were trying to. If you use the Boss Man as an example, I mean, you just said there, like, he was in his police car because he was supposed to be a prison guard, wasn't he? That was his gimmick. And you're sort of like, well, why is a prison guard wrestling? Like, surely he should just be like guarding prisoners. That's his job. And yes, it was always bizarre to me. And then so it was. I used to love all that gimmick stuff, but that was, and I sort of like felt I actually dropped off for a while. Didn't really get into it, but it was the Attitude Era that really like kicked me off again. It's probably about 96. Again, like still on Sky, I think it was. And a mate of mine had it, and I just remember catching a couple of episodes of Raw and being like, "What is this? This is crazy!" Now this is like this is totally different to what I remember from when I was a few years ago when I was younger. And just getting to, you get to see the sort of the early iteration of the Attitude Era, 95, 96, sort of like, Stone Cold, The Rock, the formation of DX and all that kind of stuff. I was so into it from that point on, really, for the next sort of like 10 years. That was it. Like you say, it was just big time.
Yeah, and leading up to this one, Scott, I think for me, it was in my life, it was quite an important time because I'd watched all this, like you say, we had the birth in 96 of Stone Cold when he beat Jake the Snake at King of the Ring and stuff, and he did the famous John 3:16 quote and all that. It was amazing. And what I remember about this was, I remember watching the year before, obviously in the Survivor Series, the Montreal Screwjob. And obviously, Bret Hart had gone to WCW. Shawn Michaels, at the time was adamant he had nothing to do with it. Obviously, it's later come out that he did know all about it. And I think pretty much everyone was in on that. However, what I find interesting about this was I got with my missus, like Sam, I got with her May 1998. And I think this was one of the last events I watched properly for about maybe a year, as in live, as in sort of the next day. And I didn't have to catch up because it was March 29th, 98. And I got with her in May. And I remember being so convinced this was real. Even, honestly, the one thing that gets me more than anything, Scott, is when Stone Cold was in the ring with Mike Tyson and he pushed him. And I remember thinking, there's no way, I don't care who Tyson is, Stone Cold would kick his ass. But when you listen to Austin now, and I know that I've done boxing and MMA, that you're like, no, Chris, it's a fucking work. Tyson would rip his throat out, but you just don't correlate that, do you?
It's funny because when you watch it back now, and it's clear like Tyson is having a ball doing all this stuff. Like he's really enjoying it. But knowing how sort of like temperamental he can be, there would have always been, especially a Stone Cold, like Steve Austin, there would have always been a moment in my head like he could just lamp me, and then I've got to do something about it. Like if he lost it or he got carried away, you know what I mean? So that was what I always kind of liked watching it, especially watching it back. So I went back and watched a couple of the clips and some of the Raws and stuff. I always went on YouTube actually just to see the bits, but you always see that, they play it so well. And I mean, people like Stone Cold and Shawn Michaels and stuff are so good at what they do. But there's always, for me, this feeling of like, Tyson could just sort of like, could really screw all of this up with like one thing. And they let him go quite far. So it shows sort of they were trying to do something different, and it pays off. It really does.
Yeah, it does, because also as well, after what had happened at Survivor Series this in 97, so this only Survivor Series 97 obviously was November. You're talking 4 months later, he just literally calmed down from the Montreal Screwjob, and then you got this thing with Tyson, and this was all around the same birth of. Everybody said, I didn't even realise, to be honest, for a long time that Vince McMahon actually owned the company. I just thought he was just a commentator. All the videos he had, he was always one of the co-commentators with Jesse the Body or whatever. And it created Mr. McMahon, didn't it? This is where, because he's in the ring then with Tyson and that, he wouldn't have been in the ring. He wouldn't have been in the ring or anything. He'd just have been a commentator, wouldn't he?
Yeah, that's it. I love when you watch it back and you have him there next with with like Jerry Lawler or sort of even when he's even younger when he's there with sort of Mean Gene and stuff. You see him as a commentator, but I love this is what it goes on to, the sort of the feud, doesn't it? The sort of like the feud, Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, and a big Stone Cold fan. Love Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think he's awesome, but he would be nothing if Vince McMahon wasn't such a sort of a pantomime villain.
Yes.
Like he's such a mustache twirling baddie, and he is brilliant at it. I love him for being able to do the stuff he does. Everything from the sort of like the over exaggerated swagger to the ring, to some of his ridiculous reactions and stuff, like overreactions. Yeah, Vince is so good. He's sort of, I think he gets undervalued as an actual performer at times.
No, he's
But
brilliant.
yeah, but this whole era is so much fun. This is where it's like it starts going off like just off like. I mean, to be fair, this Mania, I'll go through a list of the matches in a minute, is a little bit of a mixed bag because I sort of felt like you do get that sort of taste of the older stuff. Like there's still that little bit, and then you get this sort of like the true sort of Attitude Era coming through. And obviously the big thing as well is this Mania is Stone Cold Steve Austin's first WWF Championship win.
Yes. Yes.
So it's sort of like, so it's kicking off that sort of like, this is Stone Cold at sort of like the peak of his power, really.
Yeah, you're right. And I think as well, one of the things, I know we'll get into this, but it was the whole thing with Shawn Michaels because there was loads of stuff going on. Because I remember I was trying to find, before we started recording, I was trying to find the magazine name, but I like when he used to buy the WWF magazines, because it was still WWF at this point. It was always when you get the magazines, and I used to buy them. Never used to buy them every month or every couple of weeks, but I would buy them, say, every 6 months. I'd get one, and even then, as a kid, I'd be like, "It's just carried on the storyline." So, like, I remember I was absolutely devastated when the Undertaker put Ultimate Warrior in the coffin in like the Paul Bearers segment. He used to have like the Piper's Pit, and Ultimate Warrior was like he didn't have air for half an hour, and I was like, "Oh my god, he's never going to be the same." And he fought against the Undertaker. Every time he fought the Undertaker just destroyed him. Every time Warrior got him on the floor, Undertaker just kept getting up. And I think Hogan was the first one to pin him. But I remember getting the magazine when this happened, and it just carried on the storyline, and I remember at first, this is great. And then like a year or so later thinking, that's pretty shit, really. It's just so I ended up buying, I think it's called Power Slam or something like that magazine. And it come out every 2 weeks, but it had all like, the insider stuff, the real stuff. So, like, I go on the Raja stuff and read about the politics and all the other stuff because you wouldn't think there would be politics, but there is a lot of politics in wrestling.
No,
you know that.
A lot of it, yeah. A lot of egos. A lot of egos going on. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. And hey, Scott, I don't mind me saying, but you've actually done wrestling as well, haven't you? So you've got more experience than me. So
even at the lowest level, there is egos involved. Everyone thinks they're the next sort of like people's champion. It's bizarre.
It is amazing that you've done it because I've actually looked into training in the 90s, late 90s as well, doing it. I really, really wanted to do it. Even to this day, I still think I've got my John Cena spinny belt to the left of me. I still think there's going to be a call, for WrestleMania. You never know. But no, genuinely, I remember buying it and getting the insider stuff about and I remember reading on this specifically about Shawn Michaels and the backlash to the Montreal Screwjob and what was happening to him in the background and his alliance with what happened since the curtain call, which was obviously Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Ray, 1, 2, 3 Kid, what's he called?
He became X-Pac,
X-Pac.
Yeah.
And that they'd done that curtain call, so Hunter got bollocked, Shawn couldn't because he was the champion and all this stuff. And I remember like reading it and reading about what an absolute arse Shawn Michaels was all the way leading up to this. From the Montreal Screwjob, they just created a monster, unfortunately.
Well, when you talk about egos, that the guy, I think Shawn Michaels seems to have, like, if you go over his careers, it definitely had some ups and downs, like a proper roller coaster, isn't it? Because he dealt with a lot, and then he become a bit of a born again Christian, and he calmed down and all this other stuff. But during this point in the 90s, he was, he was sort of like the heartbreak kid. He thought he was on top of the world, untouchable. I mean, he did Playboy and he did all kinds of stuff, didn't he? And he was one of like Vince's. This is the top flight. There was you had, if you think about it, at this point, like you didn't have, The Rock was still only coming up. Steve Austin was just coming up. Triple H was, he's sort of he's working with Michaels, but he's still under him, if you know what I mean. That top flight at this point is still quite, this transition period is quite small, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, Scott, as I said earlier, that was also to do with the steroid scandal because Vince McMahon loved 6'6", monster, muscly, absolute behemoths, and he was trying to prove a point that he could basically, because all them people like Hogan and that had gone to WCW by this time. Kevin Nash, Sid Justice, obviously Sid Vicious in WCW. These big monsters gone. The Ultimate Warrior was always in dispute. He left in like 92 92, and he never come back till 96. And again, he was only in there a few months. He was just too erratic, and that's why they put the belts on Bret Hart and then Shawn Michaels, because they were mid card, they were tag team wrestlers really, because that's what they were. That's what I always remember them, the Rockers and the Hart Foundation all the time.
No, you're right. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because because you're right. Actually, a really good point. I've never thought about that. I mean, Bret Hart is a really good, and always has been, like a really good technical worker. Like, you know, his matches are always immaculate. They always look really good. But I never found him to be entertaining. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
He was never my boy, sort of thing. I was never hyped by Bret Hart. I mean, I go back and watch his matches now, and I'm like, they're really good, but they don't get your heart pumping. And so, but he was always better as part of that, the Hart Foundation. You know, sort of like him and Owen and Jim Neidhart. That was a great foundation. But Shawn Michaels is an oddly different sort of thing, because him and like Marty Jannetty, when they were sort of the Rockers and stuff, like they're good, and I enjoyed watching them. But like when you look at it now, you can sort of see even then that Michaels had something special where Marty Jannetty didn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you're right. It's it's like when you'd go on a football. I remember as a kid going on like football trials. One of my mates who was amazing, and I went with him, and it was all like, oh, he's brought his mate, has he? You know, because I agree. Because I was devastated, I must admit, and I bought into it completely around about 92 when we had the barbershop thing with Shawn Michaels. When he turned heel, because leading up to it, done the classic thing where like Shawn Michaels levels Marty Jannetty, or Marty Jannetty levels Michaels in one of the matches, whereas before they'd always been like best buddies and everything. And then Shawn Michaels started wearing different outfits. Didn't he? Like he wore a leather jacket, he wore like he was a bit unshaven and all that stuff. And then when he kicked him, I remember buying into that, Scott, completely. And he got Sensational Sherry. He sung his own theme tune at that point, and he used to wear them fucking white pants, which he still wears in this, obviously in this WrestleMania as well, with the red things in the middle and that. He just completely changed, but it was believable, and I never once from that point when he'd gone from like the European to the Intercontinental Champion and then to the heavyweight, I never sort of think he didn't deserve it. He always seemed to carry it, even when he fought against like Diesel or Sid Justice or even Vader, who were monsters, you know, and he always held his own.
Yeah, Michaels is one of the. Shawn Michaels is one of the consummate workers of that generation. I mean, there's a reason they call him like Mr. WrestleMania. Like, you know, there are matches he's done that you know I can refer to that I just think there's two matches in my head I always think of with Shawn Michaels. There was it's WrestleMania 19, Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho.
Yep.
Which is outstanding, that match. It's absolutely outstanding. And the angle on it's fantastic as well. Like they play it like, you know, Jericho looking up to replace Michaels. And then I'm not sure it was 20 or 21, but they had Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle. And they were on two separate shows. So I think Angle was on SmackDown and Michaels was on Raw. But they kept sort of like doing stuff to wind each other up and stuff. But the match that it results in is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And he's just one of those workers. Like he never seems to disappoint. Like he always seems to bring his A game. Always does his best. Always puts himself through hell. And I always sort of I always used to look forward to seeing Michael. So yeah, he's just one of the, you know, he has been a bit of a dick in his time. Like, you know, it's quite well documented. And I think he will admit it now. Have you ever read his biography?
No, I haven't actually. No.
It's worth reading. I mean, it has that sort of veneer of what WWE will let him say, but there's enough in there for you to sort of like, you know, to be able to look behind even that and read between the lines and go, yeah, for a certain amount of time, you were an obnoxious prick, and I'm not surprised that people didn't like you.
Yeah. It's funny because I've watched loads on him as well, Scott, because at this time he had a drug problem and he was an absolute obnoxious arse, as you just said, because he did the job for Vince with the Montreal screw job. Vince promised in the world. He was injured. He had a bad knee. He had a bad back from Royal Rumble 98 when he fell on the casket with The Undertaker. Obviously, that's when Kane comes out, and he broke a bone in his back. So you can see in this match he's in agony. But obviously, he had dependency problems with drugs, so he retired, and he did a bit like Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude did, where they retired to get like the pay. And I was devastated about this. But when you watch this now, there's a point in the match halfway through where he just goes, his back is gone completely. And I don't think he's selling. I honestly don't think he's selling that.
I think we'll get on to it, we'll get the full match, but there's a moment where he gets sort of whipped into the corner and he flips, doesn't he? He sort of flips and goes up the turnbuckle, and he hits that so hard it made me wince. And I thought the same. I was like, "Oh, you have just that's a mistake." And you sort of see him, and I'm like, "Yeah, like you say, he's not selling that. That's a legit like give it 5 minutes, sort of thing." But yeah, it's like this is, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we're saying this like with Shawn Michaels. Like these guys were heading this, and because it was when did he retire? Because I mean, DX continues for quite a while after this, but they sort of they reduced his wrestling schedule, didn't they? Sort of, he was more.
No, he retired after this. So what happened after this? I never forget this because he goes in this match. Obviously, I know we're going to get into it, but he drops the strap to Stone Cold, and the next night is when Triple H. And never forget it. Triple H comes out with China. And then the New Age Outlaws joined DX. That was the first time. And the next night, what happened was, because I was reading loads of stuff on this. I remember it really well from like all the stuff like as a kid and everything. But or as a teenager, I suppose, an adult. It was Triple H bury Shawn Michaels saying, "Oh, he's gone home and all. This is the new DX and that." They absolutely, if you get a chance, try and watch the Raw the next night.
I will do.
Bury him. Shawn Michaels was happy because Hunter was his mate and stuff, but they bury him and just basically that's where the DX that we know with Triple H is formed and the New Age Outlaws, because they were never DX. It was always Triple H, China, and Shawn Michaels, wasn't it, originally?
Yeah, because that's when it started to expand, doesn't it, for a short time? Because during the Monday Night Wars, when they take the tank to WCW, that's New Age Outlaws and Triple H and stuff, isn't it? And it's as you sort of say about people sort of leaving and going out the way. I mean, if Shawn Michaels hadn't retired for that time, because he obviously came back later. Triple H may not have been able to step up, so you may not have got the Triple H career that you had.
No, you're right, Scott, as well. And sorry to cut across you. I'm proper enthusiastic. I'm really sorry. If there's anyone who's listening as well, I don't mean to. I'm just. There's actually an article I read this week about what if Shawn Michaels had, because he retired from 98 to 2002. He did keep popping up. In 99, I think he came back as a commissioner, and then he ended up being like the owner of the WWE and all this stuff. And I've been watching some of the stuff over the last day or so as well, just to refresh your memory. And he sort of goes back with DX, but he doesn't come back till 2002. Now, and you said about matches, I think my favourite Shawn Michaels match ever is the unsanctioned fight with Triple H at SummerSlam 2002, which was his official return match, because he had Kevin Nash in his corner, like saying, like, you're back, you're going to hurt your back. And I remember him wearing jeans and these,
I was going to say, his
cowboy boots. Yeah. That match is amazing. And he beats Triple H, but then Triple H hits him with the sledgehammer at the end and he takes him out of the game then for a bit. But I think that's my favourite Shawn Michaels match ever.
That is a good match, and that's the thing. Like the work and stuff in this is really good, but weirdly, I actually think sort of like everyone talks about the Attitude Era, and I think sort of I enjoy the late 90s, and I really do. I love the Attitude Era, but partly for some reason I think sort of that a period from about like 2000 to about 2003, that 3 years as well is really solid. Like there's some really good stuff in that era.
Oh God, yeah.
And we'll have to cover a couple of that. I mean, we sort of, as we were sort of messaging each other about this, actually, we sort of went off and watched a couple of other pay-per-views. Yeah. And the one I went straight to was King of the Ring, was it 2001? It's Kurt Angle versus Shane McMahon.
The Titantron, when he fought. Is that the one? Yeah.
But the matches. I mean, this way you learn what like an absolute machine Kurt Angle is, because he does like 3 matches and he's brilliant in all of them. But when he fights the street fight with Shane McMahon, and they're fighting up the ramp, they go up the ramp, like I say, to the Titantron and to the sort of the entrance, and it's glass. Like the King of the Ring thing is glass, and he just starts putting him. He starts putting him through it, and Kurt Angle starts trying to sort of German suplex Shane McMahon through this plate glass window, and it won't break.
Yes.
So he then just grabs Shane McMahon and just puts his head clean through it, and you're just like, this is mental.
Yeah, I never forget that because Shane ends up on a heap. He hits it. Obviously, it should have smashed. It's sugar glass in it. It's supposed to smash, and it doesn't. And it's funny you say that because I went and watched. I put online the top 5 Royal Rumbles because I always say Royal Rumble's my favourite match. Just the Royal Rumble itself. The matches are nonsensical to me. It's always the main match for me. And I watched Royal Rumble 2001 because 99, Austin gets screwed because Vince McMahon is against him from 1 and 2. And Vince McMahon basically hides and ends up being a commentator and then comes in at the end and throws him over the top because Triple H or someone comes down or whatever it is and he ends up...
Yeah.
But 2001, Austin interferes in Triple H's match with Angle, costs Triple H the title because Angle's the champion, and then Triple H comes down to Austin, but Austin actually wins it. I think he wins 3. I think that's his 3rd. I mean, he's only wants to ever win it 3 times. But I watched it again, and I'm like, it's fucking amazing. It really is good.
You can so get into it. I mean, in my head, like you say, I've got a couple of matches I'm going to go and search out to rewatch. On the WWE, because the WWE network is got everything on. I mean, I was so I've got that, I've subscribed to it and sort of getting it, and there's so many. Okay, that's on Raw. This one I've gone in and Googled it, and there's a match. We'll get into WrestleMania 14 in a minute, but there's a match from Raw from around 2001, 2002, and it's Undertaker versus Jeff Hardy in a ladder match. And it's when Taker's doing the whole
Badass,
the American Badass, and it's a ladder match, and it's one where like Jeff Hardy won't quit, like he keeps getting up, and like at the end of the match, like he thinks he's left Jeff Hardy sort of like battered, and he gets up and he's like, I'm not done, and you sort of see Taker sort of go like, oh, all right, and he walks back and just pummels him some more, and then eventually sort of like holds up. They sort of stand. He's Undertaker's respect sort of thing. And like you say, it's silly and ridiculous, but I remember watching that the first time and being so sort of like invested in it, like so invested in it. It was crazy. And it's, this whole era is fantastic.
Sorry, Scott. One thing I want you to watch, though, please watch this, Scott, is they've got the WCW Saturday night events on there now. So there's a whole run of it. It's on the main page of the network, right? One of the random ones I picked out, I'll have to find out which one I watched. It's got, like, they have a weird camera angle anyway. So Sting's still got his blonde hair and all that. And, you've got, like, Vader there and all that. And Ric Flair's the champ. These twins come out, right? And they've got, I am not exaggerating, bleach blonde Ivan Drago flat top, but, like, proper blonde ponytails down to the back, but the twins, and one wears a blue cap, one wears a red cap, and I think Bobby Heenan goes, how the hell am I supposed to tell who these two are? And honestly, they're absolutely the shittiest wrestlers ever, but they're like picking them up to be like the next Rockers or something. It's terrible, Scott, honestly. Oh, it's awful.
I'll check them out. WCW, all of them. I mean, we're bigging up some of the best moments, but let's not lie. There is some terrible moments in all of this.
Yes,
like you say, for every Zamboni being driven to the ring or every beer truck being driven to the ring, there's there's Mark Henry marrying the Marvelous. Was it Marvelous Moolah and her giving birth?
Mae Young,
and her giving birth to a hand. Like what?
Sexual chocolate. I never forget it. I never.
Bizarre.
Well, at the time it was me. I was with my missus then, so it was about 99. So it was me, Sam. Sam's brother was like one of my best mates, and another mate of mine. And we may have liked a bit of the old, Jamaican Holbein, shall we say. So we used to have a bit of that on a Friday night, get a takeaway. We'd watch the wrestling, have a few drinks and that. And it used to be on, because Raw was on a Monday, but we never got it in the UK till a Friday night, 10 till 12 it used to be on, or 9 till 12. I think it was 10 till 12 it was on Sky. And they used to come round on a Friday, so we'd watch Raw. Sam hated it. She only liked watching The Rock because she liked fancied a bit of The Rock, but she hated it. And I never ever forget sitting there and I'm looking at me going, she's just given birth to a fucking hand. What the fuck is going on? And I'm like, you can't even put it down to the fact you were taking proper hardcore drugs. We were just having a smoke, but it was like, what the fuck is this? Oh, it's terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, there was some amazing moments, and some not so amazing moments. But yeah, right. So let's get into the main event. Let's get to the sort of the meat of this. So WrestleMania 14. It's 8 matches long, and I enjoyed most of them. But I will admit, like, this event takes a little while to get going.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the event, on the overall sort of like the lineup? We'll go through the matches in a minute, but the overall lineup. What were your thoughts on it, watching it?
I think one thing around this time that was always sort of prevalent with the WWF and WWE was they were quite thin on mid-card wrestlers. They certainly weren't thin on tag team wrestlers because they had 10 fucking tag teams at the first match. But
yeah,
it was very thin on mid-card. So some of the matches, especially we'll get into what they are, the Taka Michinoku one and stuff. They're just like, WWF superstars. They're just house matches that nobody cares about. However, I think it gets going. I think, once you start going from, say, Mick Foley's match, it does hit each stride. The first 2 or 3 matches were pretty mundane. However, I do think the whole presentation of it does show up how over the top they've gone now with the WrestleManias, this whole outdoor stadium. I think at this point in time, because they were fighting against WCW and week on week, they were losing viewers. They were getting hammered in the ratings, but this is where it started to turn for Vince McMahon, and that's where the whole razzmatazz started to come back into it. Like they used to have the 80s from WrestleMania 3 and the big outdoor stuff. They couldn't get the audiences from the early. Once Hogan left, they lost loads, and then it swung the Monday Night Raws. But around about 98 is when WWF beat WCW for the first time. I think it was 98 ever in the Monday Night Wars, and from there WWF was always in charge. That was literally when Austin was born, around this time.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's it. It's like, because you do start to see that there's a couple of things in this event that you do go, oh, okay, that's sort of like the birth of that. But you're right. I mean, like you say, gets going. Like we'll go through them. There's I'll just list them out to sort of show sort of like some of the names and stuff that's going on. So, as you say, there's a tag team battle royale with 10 sort of tag teams in it. That's the main feature of it appears to be is Legion of Doom 2000. The second match is Taka Michinoku versus Aguila. I can't pronounce it. Aguila.
Yeah.
Which is the light heavyweight championship, and that's an interesting one. We'll talk about that in a minute because that's quite an interesting match. As in, like you say, it seems just out of nowhere, that match. Then you get Triple H versus Owen Hart for the European Championship. Then you get a mixed tag team with Mark Mero and Sable versus Goldust and Luna. That's got some interesting stuff going on there. And then the fifth match is The Rock versus Ken Shamrock, which I loved this match. Ken Shamrock was blowing me away in this match. And then that's followed by Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie versus the New Age Outlaws for the Tag Team Championships in a dumpster match. Which again, Chainsaw Charlie is actually, as you've got him as your login for this evening. Chainsaw Charlie is Terry Funk.
Yep.
And one of my favourite moments of this Mania is he comes out, the announcer announces him as Chainsaw Charlie. He's got Funk You on his shirt, and then Jim Ross just continues to refer to him as Terry Funk. I'm
so glad you picked up on that.
So I was loving that because I love Terry Funk. And then after that, the seventh match is Undertaker versus Kane, brother versus brother. And then the final is the main event, which is for the WWF Championship. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels, with the enforcer outside ring as Mike Tyson. So it's quite a good lineup in some respects. But going back to the beginning, that tag team battle royale. You know what you said about house shows? It's a warm up match, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. And they the fact that Legion of Doom have got Sonny, they've growing the hair out. And I know around this time, Hawk was having a lot of personal issues. He passed away in 2003, did he? But
Yeah.
I mean, they even play on his alcoholism a couple of years late, which is truly awful when he's climbing the Titantron and that. And they play on the sort of real life problems he's having because Droz, who joins the Legion of Doom about a year later at 99, and obviously Droz is unfortunately is the guy who ends up he's a paraplegic now, isn't he? Because of D'Lo
broke his
Brown,
neck, yeah.
accidentally dropped him on his head. So I find it weird, but I think because they're the only ones who come in the ring with music and a full entrance, it's pretty obvious who's going to win this match, I think, to be honest. But why they've got Sunny there, Scott, I do not know, because she was always a baddie. She started with Skip, didn't she, who she was married to, Chris Candido, originally. It's like a fitness thing and that. And then she was always like a baddie heel valet, but for some reason, she just ended up with Legion of Doom, and they obviously had fuck all else to do for her.
Well, that's what it feels like, though, doesn't it? Like this opening match, like it actually opens with the very first thing you see of the event is the ring's already got a bunch of people in, so you're sort of like, well, none of them are going to win. So to even it out and to make sure you got at least some tension or at least some sort of thing, they bring down is it Farouk and
the Nation of Domination,
the Nation come down, and they've got those guys coming in. And you think, okay, so maybe it's them. And then the Legion of Doom come out in their full outfits with the helmets and the pads, and they've got full-on music. And there's like everyone's like, oh my God. Jerry Lawler's going, oh my God. And you've got Jim Ross giving it all that. And you're thinking, oh, this is obvious. Like, why else would you be going through all this? And then the match is just really messy. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember as a kid always thinking, I'd rather watch a Battle Royale than a Royal Rumble. But when you see it and you've got 20 people in a ring, all faking it, all getting in each other's way, all trying to make it look like it's real, it's pretty shit. And I know that's why I think the Royal Rumble always works better when you've got 5 or 6 in the ring because they all get the spots and that. But when you're watching a Battle Royale, it's just carnage. Until somebody starts cleaning house, it just looks like a complete mess.
Well, there's a moment in this which I thought was really funny. There's what's his name? Summit Blackman.
Steve Blackman.
Steve Blackman.
Yeah,
that's it. And there's 2 guys in sort of like bright blue tights trying to get him out of the ring and stuff. And you sort of like you can sort of see that they're like, well, look, we can't push him too far because he might actually go out, and he's obviously not to go out yet. So, and it just looks like bad acting. Where they are like, we'll push him a bit harder. And then someone comes over and sort of like, lays a forearm on them and lays another forearm, and then they stumble away, But because the ring's so full, like you can't do much. And so it just feels like the really like weird thing to start the show with, this sort of like clusterfuck, this absolute clusterfuck that sort of ends with with Legion of Doom winning.
Well, you know me, Scott. You've been on plenty of our podcasts. I've been on yours. You've been on mine. Everything. And I don't make notes. Dave makes the notes. Dave is the preparation guy. Obviously, my podcasting brother. But genuinely, I made fucking notes for this. I thought I've got to make them. So a couple of things are picked out here. So originally, you've got Billy Gunn, who's now with the Road Dogg. He's part of the New Age Outlaws. But originally, he was part of the Smoking Guns with Bart Gunn. Well, in this, you've got fucking hardcore Bob Holly, who's still going by the name of Sparkplug, but he's also called Bodacious Bob. And then we've got Bodacious Bart as well. Bart Gunn is now Bodacious. He's just look like, as you were saying, the fact that this towards the end of the card, I know we've got The Undertaker and Kane, which is truly unbelievable, but it's all done so well that you buy into it that it's his brother. I bought into it even as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old guy that they were still brothers. But all the old stuff is still there. So you've got like them guys with the bald heads, the 2 biker guys, Chains and Skull. And then you've got like the Godwins in there and all that stuff. And the Midnight Express, the old blocks. But I tell you what made me laugh, and I'm pissing myself, is Brian Christopher's in there, Jerry Lawler's son, obviously. He was with Fingy originally, later on. He was with Scotty 2 Hottie and Rikishi. too cool. But it's the fact that he don't give a shit. He's going, Brian Christopher's the best wrestler in there. He's going to win it. And every time there's a quip, it's about how good Brian Christopher is. So when Brian Christopher gets thrown over the top, he went, you should have picked a better partner and all this. He's like proper, like, and that even goes into the Taka Michinoku match where he's slagging them both off, going, Brian Christopher's the greatest light heavyweight in the company and all this. I found him heel Lawler in this. He's brilliant. He's value for money, definitely.
I love Jerry Lawler in this. I think he's great, especially, and we'll get on to sort of like. I'm surprised he hasn't spent time in prison for something, for sort of like some of the way he sort of like treats women. Yes. But when we get to like Sable and Luna,
oh yes,
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Puppy power, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it's just a bizarre start, like you say, because it's not well choreographed in any particular way. Like the final last little bit is fine, but it's not even like there's a big finish. Like they don't even use like a big tag team finish to win. They just sort of like it ends with I don't know which one it is. Just clotheslines a guy out the ring, and they're just like, oh, they've won. They're number one contenders, and you're like, all right.
Yeah,
well done.
The build up to this was supposed to be that they'd gone on a hiatus because they'd lost the title at Royal Rumble because the New Age Outlaws had come and sort of done them over. Then they lost it again on Raw to someone else, and then they went missing. So this was like their big return, the Legion of Doom. But I agree, they didn't even do the finisher where, like, obviously Animal picks him up on the shoulders and he just like the clothesline off the top rope. We got none of that. And obviously you can't knock him over the top rope. But I agree, it was a very, very flat match. And I think at this point, to be fair, with the Legion of Doom, I loved them early 90s and I absolutely loved them. So, SummerSlam 91, WrestleMania 7, everything, because they'd come in from being the Road Warriors and stuff in WCW and NWA and stuff. But they're losing a lot of the mystique at this point, and they were just like good workers. They weren't like, they're a bit like the Steiners. The Steiners were always good to watch, but I was never like completely in on them. I always liked LOD better, but I think probably about 98, I probably liked the music better than I did watching them perform, to be honest.
The thing was, I used to like them, like I say, when they were back in the day, when they come in with like the shoulder pad with the big spikes on and all that kind of stuff. Like you said, they had like a real aura about them that, you'd see them and you go, oh my God, these guys are like huge. They're really intimidating. And they were great workers, a fantastic tag team, really sort of on point as one of the best tag teams of probably of all time, really. But like, yeah, by this time, it just, I don't know, it's that thing of something the WWF seemed to do was to over-egg certain things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they'd lay it out, and so you just sort of, well, this seems to work, so we're just going to throw everything at it. And so when they come out with those ridiculous hockey masks and everything else, it's sort of like, oh, it's like you say, they feel like an action figure variant of themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, there was different variations because of problems with Hawk as well. You had obviously Droz, you had that guy John, a big guy. They might have been after Hawk passed away, and Animal was still knocking around about 2004-5. There was a big guy, John Heinrich or so, or Heinenbach or whatever he was called.
Oh
big
God,
guy.
remember that? Yes,
remember him? He was with him. He was in Legion of Doom for a while, and he actually went to Japan when they both got kicked from WWE. But yeah, I agree, and it didn't really do much. I think the problem is probably because people were sort of getting into the anti-hero stuff. The New Age Outlaws, I know they didn't join DX until the night after this event. They were still playing DX. But however, they had all that anti-hero stuff going on, didn't they? Where they were sort of like going against, a bit like a Stone Cold and what Shawn Michaels did and that. So I think people were just getting to the point where the gimmicks were just starting to die and getting a bit...
fade out, weren't they?
Yeah, they were fatiguing, to be honest.
So you've just had a bunch of monsters in the ring, a huge bunch of like huge guys. So it's been a bit flat. So you want to elevate it, don't you? You want something exciting. You want some big names to come out. You want Taka Michinoku and Aguila. What was this? I was a bit surprised actually in two ways, because I'd forgotten that they actually sort of. This feels a little bit like trying to compete with ECW in that, and a little bit of WCW. That we've got light heavyweights as well. But this match clearly told me they did not know what to do with them.
No, they didn't. I mean, I know after this we did get did get a renaissance, especially with the hardcore title and stuff, because a lot of the mid sort of cruiserweight wrestlers got a good run, didn't they? Good exposure. Hardcore Holly, Brian Christopher. There was the other Asian guy as well who actually teamed up with Taka Michinoku as a tag team. I can't remember his bloody name, and they were really good together as a tag team. However, it was one of the worst. It was only on for 6 minutes. I checked the time on the 6 minutes this was on. It was one of the worst filler matches I've seen. There was some good high spots in that, but I just kept, I'll be honest, Scott, I kept looking at my phone. I was like checking Facebook and Twitter thinking, this is pretty shit, really. You know, I didn't rate any of what was going on, to be honest.
This match, to me, having done, like I say, shows and stuff, felt to me like a couple of bump monkeys that were just sort of taking it in turns to do high spots.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, I mean, they do. I mean, I won't deny their athleticism and everything they do. Like, some of their over the rope, top rope stuff onto the outside is great. You know, they really do. But they literally take it in turns. You know, sort of, I'm coming for the top ropes with the splash, and then I'll come back with a corkscrew and sort of stuff. You're like, oh, that's fantastic. But it never feels authentic, you know, because they just pop back up again. This, you know, Aguilar's under a mask and everything anyway, but Taka's selling in parts of this match is horrendous. It's awful.
Yeah, it is. It is. I totally agree. I mean, this Aguilar, I don't even remember him. I don't remember where he come from. I mean, one thing I would say about WCW, they always had a good cruiserweight division. So we had originally, you had like Chris Benoit, you got Dean, what's he called?
Dean
Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho. You had all these people, and then you had a lot of them. Like Justin Liger used to come over, didn't you? You got all these different Asian sort of wrestlers, because at WCW they could go to Japan and wrestle in Japan and stuff as well.
Yeah,
they weren't stuck like WWE, so they had a strong thing. But whenever they brought somebody in, some new sort of Asian wrestler who was hidden behind a Libra mask, it was always shit. It was always literally like, I wanted to fast forward this match because I could never invest in it for some reason.
No, I agree. It's really like, yeah, there's some great spots in it, but when Taka wins at the end, I'm so indifferent that I was just like, oh, okay. Like, you know, you've just won the light heavyweight championship. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know, I can see why that belt sort of went away in WWF. It doesn't do anything. It's an odd one. You know, it feels like, considering who they had around this time, like you say, they seemed a bit thin on the line, but you've literally just used up like 20 wrestlers. And you could have pulled anything else out of that. I don't know. So yeah, we're probably about 25, half an hour. Between 20 and 25 minutes into the event, and I was thinking, oh, this may just be a main event. I'm not sure what else is going to come out of this. I was getting a little bit worried, to be honest.
Yeah, I was. And then obviously the next match is Triple H v Owen Hart, isn't it? So you've got two great workers. Owen Hart's always a great worker. However, I remember it well. The stipulation was China couldn't get involved. She's stuck to, she's changed the sergeant's
China.
Yeah, she was a monster then, wasn't she? But I remember watching this, and from a technical standpoint, brilliant. Even watching it now, it's a great spectacle as a match. Triple H is great. He sells everything good, and Owen Hart obviously has that proper ring savvy. They were at two, you know, Owen Hart had a few years' experience over Triple H at this point. However, I do also think, again, Scott, it doesn't like the touch paper what I expect out of WrestleMania, to be honest.
No, it's not a Mania match. I mean, I could imagine this being like a Raw match, but not a main event, but like a sort of a later in the evening sort of like Monday Night Raw match. It's good though. I mean, it has its moments. Like you say, I'm more entertained by this match than what's come before. I'm enjoying the fact that, like you say, Chyna's doing her bit as the heel outside, trying to sort of interfere and give assistance and all that kind of stuff. I'm enjoying some of that. And again, you know, you said about it being sort of like that sort of bridge between the old and the new. You know, and obviously sort of like Triple H and Chyna sort of being very much the new with DX and stuff, and Owen Hart being a little bit of both. But you've got Sergeant Slaughter as Commissioner Slaughter coming out and being handcuffed to Chyna. And again, I love the fact, I don't know whether it's Lawler or Jim Ross, says about the fact that like China, she can bench press whatever, but can she bench press Sergeant Slaughter? And it's like, I don't know, but I'd actually quite like to see that. That sounds interesting.
Why though? Why would he say that in the commentary? Not for you to say you're right.
No.
But why?
It's just funny. It just comes out with. But this match ends with such an old school gimmick that I love it. I was well into it. The idea that she gets the little bag of powder and she throws it in Sergeant Slaughter's eyes, and then there's all the distraction and all this other stuff. It's so sort of like, this is the kind of thing I'd expect from Bobby Heenan or someone like that. You know what I mean?
Mr. Fuji was renowned for that, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a sucker for those kind of old school gimmicks, though. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the knuckle duster, Ric Flair knuckle dusters come out, stuff like that. Yeah,
hidden in tights, in tights, like no one could see it. Amazing.
I like I always used to love the fucking Lex Luger one when it was like he's got a steel plate in his forearm, and that was his finisher, wasn't it? That shit forearm he did. It was just fucking nonsense, absolute nonsense. But I agree. Old school always works, and I think something like that had to work because Sergeant Slaughter must have been probably early 50s at this point. He wasn't an active wrestler, was he?
No. He was the commissioner, and like I say, they didn't have the commissioner role wasn't the same as it became later on. Like later on, it became like a performer, didn't it? Sort of role. He was basically rolled out every now and then for specific things, and that was about it. Because this is the thing I like about this is you have this sort of like the WWF seems to have held on to this thing, and even when it became WWE, Sergeant Slaughter stuck around, and obviously in this commissioner role, but for some reason as well, every now and then they'll roll out like Arn Anderson or Pat Patterson as some sort of like enforcer or something. And like, man, like these dudes are in their 60s, like just leave them alone, like stop doing this to them. As if they're going to have sort of like some impact against someone who's like like Triple H or something like that. It just looks silly, but yeah, no, you're right though. This isn't a. We're 3 matches in, and so far nothing has caught fire, has it? Really?
No. I'm interested in what you think of the next one, Scott. So I'll let you tee this one up. But I got a few things to say about this next match.
This match. So the next one is a mixed tag team that I had forgotten about. Everything about this, I'd completely forgotten about some of the people even involved in this match. Mark Mero and Sable versus the artist formerly known as Goldust and Luna, and I was like, oh, I'd forgotten all about this whole thing because the angle actually itself is really interesting. Like Mark Mero is. What's his thing? He's sort of like maybe some sort of like former boxer or whatever his gimmick was.
Golden Gloves, he was a golden
That's it, yeah. Champion, yeah. And but I like the fact that it's all ego. Like he wants to be sort of the one recognised on other stuff. So when sort of Sable starts getting a bit of chant and the signs start appearing for Sable, like he starts getting jealous and he starts becoming sort of the abusive boyfriend and stuff. It's actually interesting. Like it's not done, in the best way that the WWF have done things. They're never completely subtle, are they? But at least they take an interesting angle. And then you're sort of throwing Goldust and Luna in this weird sort of jealousy thing. It's like because the good thing is that you get like obviously with all these things you get a little bit of a pre-match snippet of like here's the angle and here's the story up until this point, and I love all those sort of edited little short stories. But with this one, I was left a little bit like lost. I was like, I'm not entirely sure why this is sort of why these two tag teams appear to hate each other, but they do, and I'm going to quite enjoy this because it looks nuts.
Yeah. I think what I found interesting was like obviously Sable is now married to Brock Lesnar. They've got kids together and everything, and it was the way they were building her up. Now, Luna, I always remember as Luna Vachon, like when she first came in it, she ends up with Gangrel, doesn't she, the next year in the Ministry in 99 and stuff. Now, obviously, she's not with us. She's passed away now, but she was a great wrestler. And one of the things they said with her in this match, Vince McMahon and that said to her was, whatever you do not hurt Sable. Because Sable was riding this, as you say, you're right, that the whole angle was Sable was outshining Mark Miro. Now, you say about Mark Miro, I remember my first ever match at WCW, I watched it about 91. It used to be on Channel 4 now and again in Channel 5. I think Channel 5 went out then, so it'd be Channel 4. Was his gimmick, he was Johnny B. Bad, and he had a big mullet in WCW, and he did the same moves he did in WWF when he come in as Mark Miro and stuff. Mark Miro, but same thing, he was a Golden Gloves champion, but he was a terrible gimmick. He had like boas on and stuff like Hulk Hogan wore later on in NWO and that, and big Ric Flair gowns and that. He was, I don't know if you ever saw him, Scott. He's absolutely terrible gimmick.
I think I've seen it. Yeah, I think I've seen it.
He's absolutely terrible. And I remember him coming into the WWF and he would say like he's an ex-Golden Gloves champion and all this, which he was. And I think they play on it really well because everyone loves Sable because she was stunning. She was like the nice version of Sunny. Sunny was basically the girl you want to meet on a night out for a one night stand, whereas Sable was the one you wanted to marry and have kids with and settle down. That's how. I'm not being derogatory towards Sunny. That's how they played the characters. Sunny was basically would do anything to get a ladder up in the WWF. That was her character, unfortunately. That's why it's always weird. She ends up with the Legion of Doom, who were always faces. They were never heels, Legion of Doom, really. So. I just found out. But anyway, they did all that, and as soon as Goldust come out and he had that silver outfit on, obviously Dustin Rhodes with that fucking negligee thing, I was like, fuck me, I forgot about this. And then Luna comes out, and then at every turn, Sable, she chins Goldust. He's 6'5", knocks him clean out on the floor. Luna gets it. Mark Miro gets a load of abuse off her. They're making her hot all the way through the game. However, the one thing I would say, and she needs to have a word with her husband, is the fact that Mark Miro and her move is basically the F5, the TKO or whatever you call it, is the F5.
I was going to call that out, yes. I was like, that looks familiar. Yeah.
I was like, what?
I was a bit shocked by that. I have to admit, though, I'll tell you what, I was a bit shocked with where this match went. Because they set it up like basically that like Sable's standing alone. You know what I mean? They make it clear that like Mark Miro is more than likely going to walk away from her. You know, he's just as likely to sort of step in and help her as he is to walk away from her. And so I kind of like that they had that dynamic going on. And then you've obviously got like the craziness that is Goldust. And there's a couple of moments in this match I quite like. I think that, you know, he plays it in a really weird, sleazy way. And I've always kind of liked Goldust. I always find him weird. You know, so even like later on when he comes back and he's in the full gold and he does all that kind of stuff. But like I say, look, when Sable kicks off at the end and she sort of takes it to them and starts doing like, you know, and the only way they can refer to it is she's doing martial art kicks. Like that's what they refer to the move as. Martial art kicks, and you're like, what is it? It's a kick. Anyone else does this? She'd just be like, it's a high kick. What?
It's not, though, is it?
No, it's not. It's clearly not a martial art kick. It's just a kick. But they, like you say, they really pushing her to come out as this as the goodie, and I think she does a really good job. I think she sells it well, and I think she sort of like holds her own in this because, to me, I always remember Sable just being sort of like you say the eye candy and stuff, but she actually comes across well in this.
Yeah, she does, and I think one thing was quite interesting listening to this again was the way Jim Ross, who's always the good guy, he's the face commentator, and Jerry Lawler was always the heel. Is the fact that Jim Ross is just throwing Mark Miro under the bus. He's basically going, look at that bastard, Mark Miro taking all the praise. It's like, well, he has actually kicked the shit out of Goldust. He's not just been sat there. He had to put the move on to pin him. Come on,
he did do something. He was involved.
He was very biased, and I could see it as they're walking out. Oh, here he is again. Mark Miro taking all the credit for Sable's hard work. I'm like, wow, JR, wow.
I would say that there was a couple of things in this from JR. JR and I mean Jerry Lawler, I think he's very good. He's a very good color commentator. He sort of, you know, he's perfected that thing of being sort of like a bit of a dick, but like never, you know, he's sort of like he's pulled back a bit on it now these days. But you know, always being that heelish sort of the color commentator heel, and I've always quite liked him for that. I do like Jerry Lawler's commentary. You know, he's really fun. But Jim Ross, you can almost do like Jim Ross bingo.
Yeah.
you know, what I mean? There are certain things that he's always going to come out with, and he says it in this. You know, he's as tough as a government mule, and it's going to be a knockdown, drag out, slobber knocker of a match. You're like, yeah. And I'm like, so you know, I'd love to do that. Like, you know, can I do sort of Jim Ross bingo? I might do that on the next pay per view I watch.
You'll have to.
I love his commentaries though; they are so good.
Oh, it's amazing when he gets irate and he's arguing with Lawler. I fucking love it. But I agree. This is where I think the pay per view starts to turn. This is a solid match. It's not completely dragging me in, but it's turning me around from what I've seen before it. And I think it's a very good point that they had this in, because obviously from here with the next few matches, there's 3 more matches, isn't there, or 4 more matches are dynamite for me, I think, in different ways.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. This was the moment that the show starts to turn around. Like you say, it wasn't lightning in a bottle. It wasn't amazing, but the fact that I was backing Sable by the end of the match, I was like, this is working for me. Like, they're doing something now that I'm getting into. I'm quite enjoying this now. By this point, I'm getting quite excited. I'm like, okay, there's some good stuff coming up now. I'm really looking forward to this. And the next one is really good fun actually. Especially the finish. It's The Rock versus Ken Shamrock. And you'll know this because I've never told you. I can't remember. Ken Shamrock was a proper like fighter, wasn't he? Like a UFC kind of fighter and stuff.
He was a heavyweight champion. He was the
he was, wasn't he?
US. My thing with Ken Shamrock was when he came into the wrestling in '98. Ultimate Fighter was being shown. So UFC 1 was around about 93, but we were on about like UFC 15 or whatever at this point. And he'd been in and out of the UFC at this point. And then obviously you got Dan Severn came in, he was a cage fighter, but you also had, what's the other guy? There was another cage fighter who fought against, I think Dan Severn was the main one, fought against Ken Shamrock, and they had proper brawl and stuff, and I think Dan Severn beat Ken Shamrock. But I got into the UFC or into MMA from Ken Shamrock because I love Ken Shamrock. I loved his look. He's got a great body in this. He's a stocky meathead. He's tough. He was always the one they used as like an enforcer, didn't he? Because he was a tough guy in real life. And they always, like, obviously, you've got the match, haven't you? The guest referee and stuff where he does it where it's Austin in it. Austin and he's a special force.
I know what you mean. Basically, because he basically has the referee shirt that's like spray painted on, isn't he?
Yeah, with his arms out and stuff, and he's the ref and everything.
Yeah.
I believed in him, and I remember pursuing like the UFC stuff. So whenever I could get it, 'cause it wasn't always available like it is now, but I've literally been an MMA fan because of Ken Shamrock from this point, and that's where I think later on in the 2000s, especially the middle 2000s, I had a massive problem watching the products, even though it was a good era of like Edge and, you know, I know he was what happened with Benoit and stuff and Eddie Guerrero and that, but that Toothless Aggression era was brilliant, but I was into the proper stuff then, a proper fighting really badly. And I watch UFC probably more. I watch UFC now, and I very rarely watch the current product, to be honest, because MMA is pretty much up there with football for me.
It is good. I mean, what I'll say is though, there's 2 things I'd say about Ken Shamrock. Because he looks, like I say, he is. You can tell just from the way he carries himself. Like, he's a legit tough guy. Like, you wouldn't mess with him. He's got the John Bernthal look about him, to be honest. I don't know why, but every time I see him, I'm like, he looks like he would have been like him and John Bernthal, like they're sort of like separated by time. They'd be amazing together. But the other thing is, I say, when he gets in that ring, and he works with The Rock, and The Rock's I've always thought the Rock's a great worker, but a fantastic entertainer.
Yeah.
So he knows how to sort of like use like 4 moves in different ways and make them look fantastic in different ways. But his moveset is never going to be massive. But there are a few moments in this match where you do think, oh, Ken Shamrock's a little bit tight with that. Like some of his shots and some of his moves, I'm a bit like, he's a bit tight with that one.
Yeah.
But and The Rock sort of like looks a bit like stunned. but like you say, it looks. We've said before about this is almost the opposite of that Taka Michinoku and Aguila match, right? Because this feels like a rumble. Like this feels like a proper brawl at times. And I was by the end of this match, I was well into it. I was really enjoying it.
I loved it, and I love the fact that Shamrock gets disqualified. Don't know, they gets reversed the decision because of his ankle lock, which is utter bollocks. But obviously, this is when the Rock starts to evolve. This pay-per-view is very important because this is where the Rock evolves. He takes over the nation because Farouk sort of leaves and he gets with Bradshaw then, doesn't he? And becomes like the APA as such, or the acolytes and stuff at this point. But he becomes the leader of the nation, and then slowly, this is when he's starting to evolve into the Rock. Know your role and all that stuff, jabroni and all this, and that's exactly what is going on. I mean, I don't think it's this pay-per-view because I've watched like the '99 Royal Rumble, but that Royal Rumble the year later is when he does the you smell what the Rock is cooking. He does a weird interview with this woman, dead sleazy, but he's still the bad guy then. And I think the nation doesn't last much longer after this. But what I love more than anything, Scott, is at the end, is Shamrock. He's just standing up doing these body slams, like these belly to belly slams. And when he does Mark Henry, fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's they've got him cornered. I mean, that's the thing. So you've got the Rock. Because obviously there's an angle here as well that the Rock sort of at some point previously has given Farouk a chair shot, and so so the Rock's accompanied to the ring by D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry, as the Nation of Domination. And they come out and say they've sort of the match. I mean, the match is good. It's good. It's fine. It's a pretty good match. I'm enjoying the match, and it leads up to because it keeps sort of that. And that's the thing I like about it. It keeps this one actually escalates. Like it escalates to the finish. So when he locks on that ankle lock, and the Rock's really selling it. The Rock's obviously busted up a little bit. He's got a bit of blood on. It looks like really good. But Ken Shamrock sells it like an absolute psycho, like he won't let go. And I was like, "This is brilliant! I'm so into this right now. This is amazing." This is good. I mean, it goes all over as well. The fact they're fighting outside the ring and they do all the bits and pieces. Like this is getting into the kind of stuff I really enjoy of this era.
Yeah, I agree. And he's come back to me actually, Scott, because probably people listening are like, "It's that one." Ken Shamrock was the ref at WrestleMania 13 between Stone Cold and Bret Hart because I've just watched the Stone Cold and Bret Hart Broken Skull sessions on the network where they're talking about their match. Sorry, Ken Shamrock was the ref. That's where that was. I knew it was one of them. I couldn't remember. I watched that many events this week. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I like the fact that and again, this comes back to that commentary, because the referees all corner him in the corner of the ring, and they go down like he looks like a wild animal. Does he even know where he is? Does he even know what he's doing? And he's like body to body slamming all these referees and stuff. And he's just like Ken Shamrock's just on one, and then he runs out the ring to attack the Rock, who's being because again, one of those famous wrestling tropes. He's been ferried out of the ring on a gurney on a hospital stretcher. And they're like, oh, will he walk again? And then he just comes out and starts leathering on him in the aisle. It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Will he walk again? That is fucking nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love all that. I totally agree. That's the sort of shit. I mean, I watched Royal Rumble 91, and me and my brother and my brother's best mate, and I've got like 3 brothers. And one of them's a lot younger than me. He's like 25, 26. And he loves the wrestling. He grew up with it because of me. He only lived with me for a few years, and then I left, and he was only like 5 or 6, but he's always watched the wrestling because of my influence, and played the games as he was a teenager with me and all that, like the PS2, SmackDown games. We always send each other stuff. So we always send this Jay Lethal thing on Facebook. Jay Lethal, when he's in TNA, does an impression of Ric Flair. Have you ever seen it, Scott?
I think so. I think I've seen it on YouTube.
It's truly amazing. So he does a great impression of Rick. So we tag each other on that literally every day. The three of us just keep tagging this video. This video's getting hundreds of views because of us, because we do it every day just to wind each other up. We always say, like, have you seen this video? And like people do. And it's us. You look on the timeline of this video, there's thousands of comments, but it's just us streaming it every day, literally tagging each other. And then the other one is the Big Show because of JR. You said about JR's commentary. And I was watching Royal Rumble 91, right? 2001, sorry. And the Big Show had obviously not been in it for ages. He comes in as a surprise entrance, starts levering everybody, and he picks up Val Venus. And he picks him up and slams him. And JR goes, "It's like a man playing with children." And you're like, what the hell? You can't say stuff like that. But they're the sort of stuff that with JR, it's absolutely fucking amazing. His commentary with Stone Cold made Stone Cold as well, to be honest. Absolutely brilliant.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I totally agree with that. And it's just his enthusiasm, because it escalates throughout the event as well. Like, you know, like you say, so by this point, like he's really warming up. And so, like you say, it's just they're starting to sort of tickle that thing of like, oh, we can do something a bit more hardcore because you've had this sort of like event, this match, and it's okay, so I'm up for it now. And so the fact that they follow this up with a sort of a dumpster match, is again, it's sort of like, it's one of those things that you sort of like, you go, from a booking point of view, I can sort of see what they were doing because you get two singles matches either side of it. But I was like, okay, this is bizarre. And you know, we've talked about this throughout the thing about the sort of like the weird sort of how thin the roster was for big talent at this point. Because this is almost like you know, you got you're two matches now away from the main event. And you're about to do a dumpster match with the New Age Outlaws, Billy Gunn and Jesse the Road Dogg, versus Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie. Now, I will say I'm a massive Mick Foley fan. Huge Mick Foley fan. I've always have been. You know, from I've retrospectively gone back and watched all the sort of like the ECW, the Japanese, the WCW stuff, all these kinds of things. And so Cactus Jack has this sort of like, you know, this sort of aura about him that they utilize it fantastically a couple of years later for Mick Foley versus Triple H. I think it's Royal Rumble 2000. And they have the street fight, don't they?
Yeah.
And in that, they're sort of like, you know, he's there as Mankind in the white shirt and the mask, and it's one of my favorite segments of all time. It's easily my top 5 segments, wrestling, sort of like non-wrestling wrestling segments. You know, sort of like the interviews and stuff, promo segments. Is when sort of like Mankind comes out and he says like, you know, you bust my face, you bust me up. I can't face you at Royal Rumble, and you need we needed a replacement, and I'm going to name him right now. And he pulls off the mask and he pulls open the shirt and he's like, his name's Cactus Jack. And I was like, I think Cactus Jack is such a great character. And, you know, he's obviously got Terry Funk, but they don't seem to do anything with them in this. There's no pomp or pageantry. It's just sort of like, they just sort of bring them out so that they can basically sort of, it's all about selling the New Age Outlaws, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet they lose.
Yeah, they lose. And obviously Terry Funk, which I don't know why he was called Chainsaw Charlie. I still can't work that out. And you said off air that you're right. Jim Rossi's calling him Terry Funk. So what is the fucking point of having this name is just nonsense. However, I would say that it's a good match. It's a solid match. But Terry Funk's in his 50s here. I mean, Terry Funk wrestled till he was in his 70s. He's about 75 now, and he still keeps saying he's going to have one more match. Now, I know when I've done my podcast, we've had him on. He's been in Roadhouse. He's a baddie in Roadhouse, one of the doormen, and he's in one we did the other week, Over the Top. And I said to Dave, Terry Funk, the rest, and Dave's going, I ain't got a fucking clue who that is. But that's obviously Terry Funk. He's in this. But I think what's weird about this, though, Scott, as well, is it seems to when, because they go out of the arena and he gets in the forklift and that one of them's there's a couple of high spots. There's one where Mankind or Cactus Jack and Billy Gunn fall off the ladders and they both land in the bin. That they had to have that perfect because a foot either way and they're getting seriously hurt and they land perfect. So I give them that. There was a couple of good spots there. However, the ending was a bit shit, I thought, because he double DDTs them and stuff, and then obviously Cactus Jack puts the thing over, and then Terry Funk's in the stacker truck with the pallet and all that, and he's pushing it in. But there's no euphoria there because the crowd aren't there. They're not connected to it. I don't know whether you picked up on that. For me, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but for me, it just felt a little damp and a bit dry at the end. I just didn't feel it.
No, I agree. I totally agree. It's a weird finish to a match. In that, like I say, they build it up in the arena because you've had the dumpster sort of wheeled down, and they've, like I say, they've had some pretty good spots. I mean, like you said, that there's like I said, the moment of Cactus and Billy Gunn coming off the ladder. There's a moment where Cactus Jack's like somersaults. He basically gambols into the side of the dumpster to try and get Jesse Road Dogg. And it's like there's some great moments in this match. It's actually quite good fun. There's some good hardcore moments. And then, like I said, they leave the ring, and then they leave the arena. They're all backstage, and there's some good moments. Like there's sort of the pair of them, New Age Outlaws, beating up Cactus as they go around. And I kept thinking, it's going to go in a circle, and they're going to come back through the crowd back to the ring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they don't, and then they just sort of seem to finish it in a dumpster just by the car park, and it sort of like it ends on like a real damp squib, and you're like, oh, well, okay, well they won, but the other thing is as well is like you say, you clearly know that this match has got no legs, if you know what I mean, in the sense that they win the tag team championship. So, Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie win, or Terry Funk win the tag team championships. But as you say, the whole first 4 minutes of this is the New Age Outlaws bigging themselves up. They're like the new and up and coming thing. And then the next night they join DX. So it's clear that this is going to be sort of like a sort of a quick, all right, well, they've won it for a week and then they got it back. It's fun. I did enjoy this match. I went tonight. I did enjoy this match. I always enjoy watching Terry Funk work because I think, like I say, even when he's like, even when he's not doing great because he's clearly injured or whatever, like he gives it his all. So I enjoyed this, but yeah, I was confused by the finish.
Yeah, I think that's right. Exactly the same. Now, Scott, obviously, I'm not trying to take over, but let's go on to these main events, haven't we?
Yeah. Go on, I'll let you go on. You can do the next one. What's the next sort of the next singles match?
Well, for me, this one is brother v brother, which even at 19, I'm trying to work out my age. I was 19 when this was on. I still believe that Kane, who'd come into it, decimated Undertaker in the Royal Rumble when it was mentioned about Shawn Michaels hurting his back. And it built up, didn't it? He was going to fight his brother, and he showed on the Titantron before that he wouldn't hit Kane. Kane was smacking him. He's like, no, it's my little brother. And then eventually the Undertaker snaps. And this is one of the gimmicks, Undertaker v Kane. Even I was 19, I was actually, that's my future wife. I'm in a relationship, and at 19, I'm still believing that this is fucking real. It's just because I used to think some of it's not real. Like I went through a big thing with Austin, even at 17, 18, going, no, it's definitely real. Like, it's not like the other stuff. I honestly believe, because Austin was so good, like with Triple H and that I just put it to the back of my head that it was fake. It wasn't fake. It was fake, sorry, but I knew it was, and I just went with that. It was real. And this again, why would you have somebody who dressed like a fucking Undertaker and a guy with a mask on? You'd be fucking, people would be running in the streets, but you'd be like, oh, it's his brother, he's burnt him, he's left him in a burning house and all this. So I've teed that up a bit to go, well, what was your whole thing with this angle?
No, I'm with you. I loved it. I mean, the thing that makes this for me is Paul Bearer, which, and let's be honest, like that, if you're going to call anyone anything, Paul Bearer and the Undertaker, what a gimmick. I mean, and also, like you say, having someone be able to have a pun as a name is always good. But his sort of like, high-pitched squeaky voice and sort of like, but being that sort of like the dumpy guy. I love Paul Bearer as a manager. Oh, yes! And all that kind of stuff. Brilliant. He's amazing. So all this thing, like I say, where he was building up and he kept saying to him, like, Undertaker, he's coming for you. And it was building up. And then he eventually appeared. I can't remember what event was it at, but it was a Hell in the Cell, wasn't it? Was it Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker,
Yeah.
Hell in the Cell, and it all goes red, and he rips the door off the cage and all this other stuff. And you're just like, my God, this guy's an animal. Like, this is incredible. And so I was well into it. I was so into this sort of gimmick. It's amazing. And the fact he is as big as, and if not meatier than Taker, like he looks like a legit threat. Like, this is someone who has, Taker's been someone who sort of like ran through the WWE for since the early 90s, and decimated so many people. Everything from from Hogan to what was the sumo wrestler.
Oh, Yokozuna.
And all this other stuff. So he's done all this stuff, and you're like, oh, sorry. And now you've got somebody. I was legitimately thinking, like, yeah, this guy could do damage to Undertaker. This is incredible. So,
it's funny, Scott, because I don't remember WrestleMania 9. They brought in El Gigante, who was from WCW, big Mexican wrestler. He's about 7'7", huge, and WrestleMania 9 was actually in Vegas. It's Caesar's Palace. Obviously, I love Vegas, as you know. I always go on about it, bore everyone's senses with it, but I love that city so much. And it led up to it where he come out El Gigante with Harvey Whippleman, and he had this weird, like, fake bodysuit on. It was like a sort of all-in-one sweatsuit, but with fake abs and chest there.
That.
Remember, and it made him look like he was muscly. But he towered over the Undertaker. Obviously, the Undertaker, he's genuinely 6'10". Mark Calloway, 6'10". So he's Kane. But when he come into this, I totally agree. I never bought that gimmick. You knew Undertaker was going to win. At first with El Gigante, he kept hitting him, nothing happened. Then eventually beat him at WrestleMania 9. However, and we never really saw him again. When you saw this guy come in, Kane, you were like, oh shit, he's in trouble. Now I remember him as Dr. Isaac Yankem, but that's another. But another terrible. He was Jerry Lawler's dentist. It was also with Bret Hart, wasn't it? In that, but he was a terrible dentist. But I remember him then, Glenn Jacobs, and he'd done a couple of little gimmicks. But the Isaac Yankem one's terrible. But they only acknowledge that sort of stuff now, don't they? Because you didn't know who he was. He had a mask on. Everyone was like, "Who is this guy? He must be." And I'm with you. I think this was brilliant WWF storytelling at its finest for me, and having Paul Bearer there to be the bit like what Paul Heyman is with Brock Lesnar. He's the mouthpiece. Paul Bearer had that mystique, didn't he, all the time? That stupid voice he used to do and everything.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Paul Bearer. So I always like a manager. I like the sort of the baddie managers. I think they're great. But this one, I say, even the costume they chose. The whole gimmick was that. I mean, the story was that apparently Undertaker had set fire to their parents' mortuary, and when they were young, which even when you say it, it's ridiculous, and had killed, for whatever reason, he taken like some psychotic break or something, and he had burnt it down and killed. He thought he'd killed his brother, and so sort of like Kane comes out, and he's like, say, he's huge. He's just a big meaty bloke. He's wearing that mask, and he's got one arm sort of revealed, and then basically his costume sort of covers the rest of his body, doesn't it? And so you're sort of led to believe that, like, no, the only thing that's not burnt is this one arm. And I was just like, I don't know, for some reason, like I was just buying it. I was so into it. It's such a good, it's soap opera level storytelling. Like, it's EastEnders kind of level ridiculousness, but it works. And I like the fact that they're supposed to be relatively supernatural as well. Like, they could bring down lightning and make fires, or the Undertaker can sort of like be burnt in a coffin then disappear, and all this other stuff. Like, it was just good. It was just really sort of like you said, it was WWF doing a story well.
Yeah. Yeah, and as always, Scott, the Spanish announce table with Tito Santana got a kick in as usual, did it? They always end up on the floor, the Spanish announce people.
You can always tell when that's going to happen because they get introduced probably about 5 minutes beforehand.
Yeah.
So you'll get Jerry Lawler or whatever and going, don't forget we're with, or JR will be like, and we're joined by our great Spanish announcing team, and you're like, oh, they're about to get fucked up.
Yeah, because Tito Santana obviously was El Matador. He was in it. He was a tag team champion at one point, I think, in the 80s. And obviously, he was never good enough, really. He was proper mid-card, but he was always have his glasses on, wanted giving that sort of insight.
Yeah.
But I always used to think, are they really doing Spanish commentary or not? You know, like some people in Mexico, I used to think it was bullshit, to be honest. It was just like a prop.
Well, can you imagine if that was if you know we watch and we're getting sort of Jerry Lawler and JR, and you're thinking, oh, you got a constant commentary. If you're listening to this in Spanish language, yours gets interrupted at least once a show.
Yeah.
Where sort of like for at least 10, 15 minutes, you've got nothing. You've got no commentary because they've just been laid out by someone coming over the top rope.
Yeah.
So it must be really frustrating.
Hello, are you there? Hello.
Yeah.
No, he's on the fucking floor at the moment. But no, I agree. Very, very bizarre. It was like a running gimmick, wasn't it, through the late 90s and that. And then Undertaker obviously wins. He does 3 tombstones. But again, he beats him. But then Kane still does it on him, doesn't he? And ends up sort of... it's... I don't know. It was a good match. This is a great match. There's nothing wrong with this match. I just wish Undertaker could have walked out without actually getting attacked again by Kane, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it would have been better with a clean finish, which would have been nicer. But I like the finish because again, like there's the moment that he, when Kane tombstones Taker, and he does that, and you think, oh my god, like that's you get the JR reaction, and there is a moment because he gets a 2 count from it, and he just pushes out. Oh my god, that's actually sort of like that's quite impressive. Yeah, I was even knowing like the result of this and everything else that comes after this. I was actually I was quite tense watching this one. Like I know Taker wins this match because of the streak and everything else. But yeah, I was all that was out my head, and I was like, no, I'm so into this.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. Now, Scott, I'll be honest with you. This is the main event now. Now, I am... My favourite wrestler ever is Stone Cold Steve Austin. I might have a gamer tag, a Hulkamania, which I was as a kid. I love the Hulk and Ultimate Warrior and stuff. Stone Cold Steve Austin, 316. Even now, he's been on the Wrestling This Week on Raw. I never watch it, but I always tune in when he's on. And he had an empty crowd, and he still sold it to them all. I love Austin. And this match, I was in complete awe at like 19 years old because Mike Tyson was there as the enforcer, wasn't he? Shawn Michaels was just like the champ. He was an arse, an arrogant guy. And we'll get into that obviously with that. But I loved it. What was do you remember any of this? Because I remember this whole storyline leading up to it. I was watching Raw religiously at this point.
I do, not as probably as much as that. I do remember it, and again, I'm a Stone Cold fan, like a massive Stone Cold fan. Like the moment that glass breaks, it's just one of those noises. You sort of you hear it and you can't help but the da dun da dun. He goes, I'm all in on Stone Cold. But the setup for this match, again, we just talked about the good storytelling of Taker and Kane, and that was more like fantasy, that sort of the soap opera kind of stuff. There's an authenticity to this, though, isn't there? Because this is like a grudge rather than some ridiculous story. And so, like, yeah, the lead up to this is I went back and watched a couple of bits and pieces, and it was really good. Again, it's one of those where, Vince, obviously, and the writing team, whoever, like they got it right. They tapped into the pop culture of the time, bringing in Mike Tyson. It gets the attention of the press and all that kind of stuff. It just feels like it just sort of feels, I don't know, authentic feels is the best way I can describe it. Like it gets a bit silly when it was just when all of a sudden they reveal he's a member of DX or he's going to join DX, and you think, well, I can't see Mike Tyson doing this for the long haul, but all right, up to WrestleMania, it'll be good fun. But yeah, they played this perfect. They really did.
Yeah, they did, and I think when I was still believing that it was real was I never ever forget this was when Austin was in the ring to sign the contract, because originally Tyson was supposed to be the referee and for some reason they changed. They obviously couldn't referee, so it's changed to be an enforcer. Was the pushing match that ensued. He had all Mike Tyson's entourage and Austin ends up like jumping on one of Mike's bodyguards and giving him the fake punches, and Mike's there. 'Cause I never forget Mike looking at him. and like they look at each, gets in his face, and he does this thing with his hands, Tyson, and then shoves him. But you can see when he shoves Austin flying back.
Yeah.
I think Austin's like, oh shit, even though it's fake, and he said, push me. And Austin looks bigger than Tyson. Tyson has got obviously that inner strength, you know, and he knocks him flying. And then I always remember that as a build up and how like he was double crossing him. Now, I remember this as well, because as I said about the insider stuff was because of the Montreal screw job, Shawn Michaels didn't want to lose the match at WrestleMania. He felt like he'd paid his dues, he'd put himself out there, he'd really made himself unpopular with the dressing room, and Vince McMahon was going to reward him, but Vince McMahon wanted to give it to Stone Cold. Now, I watched something with Bruce Pritchard and read some stuff about it. Bruce Pritchard was Brother Love one. He still works at the WWE now in the background. And he said that out of a 10, one being that somebody you work with, one of the wrestlers, he's great and he's really, really hassle-free. He said Shawn Michaels was like a 9.5 or 10 around this time. He was an absolute arse. He said he didn't want to drop the strap to Stone Cold, not because of Stone Cold, but he felt like he deserved top billing, even over Tyson. He had a drug dependency thing. So I'm not speaking out of term here. This is all documented. Shawn Michaels says it all. He had a drug dependency issue. He wasn't going to drop the title. And The Undertaker had come back from his match. And as he was the locker room leader, and he said that The Undertaker, Bruce Pritchard said, The Undertaker sat there and was strapping his wrists up and basically told everybody, Shawn Michaels does not do the right thing and give Steve the belt. I'm going to basically kick the shit out of him. Now, I watched something with Shawn Michaels just before we recorded, and he says, The Undertaker did everything he's saying, but the only thing I didn't see was him wrapping his things up. He basically went round and said to Hunter and everyone, if he doesn't do the job, this is like the worst thing for the locker room and the morale of everyone. And he's going to be an ass. He went, I'm going to fucking basically beat him up. And Shawn Michaels says, he's in Manchester, actually. It was a show from a couple of years ago. He says, he actually was going to beat me up, you know, and all that. So he admits that he was a horrible person around this time, very arrogant, believing in the character. And then after the match, I know we'll talk about the match, but when Mike Tyson puts the Stone Cold t-shirt on his face, he didn't want that. They were going to do that. And he said, I don't want it. And basically Vince overrode and told him to put it on his face because he was knocked out from the punch. And that's why Shawn Michaels tried to burst into the press conference at the end, because he felt that, one, he should have still had top billing, and two, he'd been disrespected. And that's when he retired then at that point because of his injuries and stuff. He had to have a back operation. But yeah, what a arrogant man. I mean, you wouldn't even think he's the same person now, because he's a you know, found God and everything. He's a really, really nice bloke. He's made amends to Bret Hart and everyone else. He really is a different person, but he was a horrible person. And that made his character even better, I think.
Oh, well, yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things they always say, isn't it, is the best sort of wrestling gimmick is actually you know, the real person, like turned up to 11. You know, they need to do it all out. And so that arrogance, that sort of self-assured sort of like obnoxiousness comes through, like literally like oozes off him. But weirdly, I mean, even before the match starts, you know, they go to the gorilla position and you see them sort of ready to come out, sort of like Michaels is there with China and Triple H, and he says like, "This is for you, Earl," and it's obviously because Earl Hebner's in hospital.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, okay, that's sort of quite an interesting sort of moment to capture on film. And then, like, you know, he goes to the curtain and he's off being his usual obnoxious self. But he does have a charisma. And I think that's what's so good about it. Like, that's why I like Shawn Michaels, that he can be, and you know he's being an obnoxious prick. You know he's going to be this person. But he's got such a sort of a lovable charisma that it's almost like, yeah, he's almost like the lovable prick. You know, he's that friend who's always going to get you in trouble, but you're always going to let them off.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as well, I always signify this era of Shawn Michaels is his body, because he's geared up to fucking this. He looks massive, doesn't he? He's a big lad in this, Scott. You know, you can see that. The mid-90s era is when he really bulked on the muscle. And I think the problem is, he's such a good wrestler, and he calls the matches. Like, one of the things why it created Stone Cold after this as well is earlier, a few months earlier, or maybe 6 months earlier, was when Stone Cold stopped being basically like a ring technician, because he got dropped on his head, didn't he, by Owen Hart, a pile driver. So he was injured anyway going into Stone Cold. He had a knee problem because he had he started wearing knee braces then. But also he was still not right because he literally was paralysed in the ring, wasn't he, when Owen Hart dropped him on his head? Because I watched that the other day with the Bret Hart thing. He was talking about like Owen, and when he tries to roll him up, because the match was actually a kiss my ass match, but he had to say to him, I can't feel my hands. And he tried to roll him up, and Owen Hart just lays there. It's the worst roll-up you've ever seen because Austin had to win the match. But, I think that makes this even better, though, because Austin has to make it a brawling fight because he can't do a lot of the things at this point in his career.
No, I agree. I mean, it becomes sort of the defining characteristic of Austin's style then for the next sort of, quite some time really, because he obviously goes off and has the operation and comes back and all that sort of stuff, and it's sort of that brawling style becomes his style, and it makes me wonder, like, if he hadn't have had that injury, like what kind of match could have him and Shawn Michaels had at a WrestleMania, because he was the ringmaster, wasn't he, when he first came in?
Yeah.
He was the ringmaster working for Ted DiBiase, so
$1 million champion, yeah.
Yeah, so he was, he could do all that wrestling, the real, legit, technical wrestling stuff. But I do like that this is actually a bit of a brawl, like it's a fight, and I think some of the and one of the things that Michaels is good at is selling, and he's good at bumping. Like, he can bump like anybody, and so he gives that legitimacy to when someone gives him a good idea, like he makes it look good. It's just some of the stuff in this, some of the spots in this are really good. But again, when they go out the ring and they do all their bits and pieces, like it's just this is a main event. Like, this is a proper main event for me. I was really, again, I was proper on the edge of my seat with this one as well.
I'd forgotten quite a lot of the match, and I agree, because there was something Bret Hart was talking about, was his thing to give back to his opponent. He always said was that one where when he gets shoved into the turnbuckle, but Bret Hart always went face first, didn't he? So he'd hit it with like his solar plexus right in the middle of his chest, and he'd fall back. Shawn Michaels, as you were saying, was he would go in, and at the last minute he like flipped upside down, hit his back, and then he used to flip over the top rope, didn't he? And then end up on the ground. That was like his little gimmick all the time. And I agree, some of the brawling stuff, and I think it works well because you got Mike Tyson there. If you had two guys just doing holds and fucking like the old Hulk Hogan thing, like, the 1, 2, oh my God, no effects, intentional fortitude, and that's one thing JR says, and I love it. He comes back from Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon used to always say the intentional fortitude when Hulk was like hulking up, when he's like on his back, he's about to be dead. The next minute, his hand just comes down at the last second. He's like, oh my God, he's got that intentional fortitude, the adrenaline, and he says it, JR. In this, I was pissing myself. I was like, oh, I like that. That's a proper kickback to Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah, no. Some of this is the one that, again, it does have that comment of like, as tough as a government mule. He says it during this match, and I'm like, yes, they're proper like JR comments. But you're right. Like a technical match probably wouldn't. The thing is, again, I sometimes think like a technical match doesn't really pay off as a main event. You need a bit of a brawly kind of. Big payoff, I think, at the end for that moment. And I like the fact that they do the sort of the twist around, especially when he's trying to get the stunners in, and then sort of going for the sort of the super kicks and all that kind of stuff. But what do you think of the finish of this match?
I think it didn't make sense because Tyson counts in 1, 2, 3. He was an enforcer, so we didn't have a referee, and everyone just seemed to accept it. Obviously, we had the sweet chin music, we had the high flying stuff from Michaels and all that stuff. But Austin Austin ducked the super kick, and then he went for a stunner 1, 2, 3. I do think because of his back injury, because you can clearly see halfway through this match. And it's a 20-minute match, that Michaels does something to his back because he's already injured. His back's fucked at this point. But he does something and he's limping badly. And I think it may have just been the injury. He just couldn't carry on because you can see he's really annoyed with himself. He's not selling nothing there. He's not faking it. He's genuinely hurt. He's limping and everything. So I think, and that wasn't played out in the storyline, because they would have said like, oh, he's got a badly injured back. You don't know if he's going to defend the belt. That's the sort of stuff they would do for a face. They certainly wouldn't do it for the main heel of the company and start making excuses about his back and that, would they? So it'd be something like Austin. If it was Austin would have like a full fucking neck brace on and that, wouldn't he? And then like they do where they have a cast on the legs, don't they? And all of a sudden one week they just smash the cast off, and the baddie's like, the heel's like, oh fuck, I'm in trouble. They couldn't have done that with this. So I think genuinely Shawn Michaels is really suffering in this match.
Well, I think one of the things I noticed at the end, towards the end, there's at least two moments where, something happens. I can't remember. He either gets thrown out the ring, or there's another moment where something else happens. He basically gets placed, is what they call it. He gets placed, and Stone Cold gives him a minute. So I honestly think that you're right. I think he did, and I think it's that flip up the turnbuckle at one point, because he takes it really takes a hit. And Stone Cold, gives him a minute, so he goes and sort of like has a bit of a moment with Tyson or whatever, and it just feels like he's giving him a breather.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. I'm giving you a couple of seconds. I'm going to come back and get you in a second, but take this time to sort of compose yourself, and then we'll lead to the finish. But even that super kick at the end, when he goes for that super kick, and it's so he ducks it, and then he does the stunner and stuff, and all that whole finish. It's fine. I'm happy with it, and it seems fine. But it doesn't feel like it's got the energy that was there at the sort of, you say, the first half of the match. And I do think, like I say, that it's obviously to do with that injury. But I don't care. Like you say, it's one of those things that, look, I'm so into it, and I'm so enjoying these two workers that when the finish comes, then you get that stunner. It's a big payoff that I was like, yes, sort of like, fist pumping and sort of and all in on it.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is that the double turn of Tyson feels unnecessary.
Yeah, I think what you said before, Scott, was right. Tyson's just pissing himself through this whole thing. He's supposed to be like this. He looks completely disorientated when DX are with him at the start, because obviously Triple H and China are there, but they get run out of town, don't they, by the ref in the end, because Triple H has been a bit of a cock and stuff. Typical heel stuff. But every time they go to Tyson, he's just got like a smirk as if he's going to burst out laughing. And at no point did I believe anything other than the fact he was just eye candy. He was there because he was suspended from boxing because he'd bitten Evander Holyfield's ear off. That's the only reason they got him for Vince McMahon Controversy 101. There was no reason for him to be there. He contributed fuck all to the match, really. But yeah, I didn't believe any of it. He looked really, really awkward, like they give him no training or direction where to look or move. He looked really odd.
Well, that's what I thought was weird, because, like you say, there are moments like when they do send China and Triple H back, they send them back up the sort of the entranceway and stuff, and they have to leave the ringside. And you can see sort of Mike Tyson sort of plays it up a little bit with that sort of like, calm down, love, it's going to be fine. He sort of like, he puts his hands up and he says, like, don't worry, I've got this kind of thing. But in my head, I was thinking like, oh, I thought you sort of had at least one of those out there to give him direction. Because, at this point, Mike Tyson, say controversy creates cash. I know that's sort of like the ethos they were going for. But he could still be a bit of a loose cannon. And leaving him on his own on ringside to do whatever he wants could have been disastrous, to be honest.
Yeah, it could have been, to be honest. I totally agree. He obviously got paid a lot of money for it because he wasn't earning money, Tyson. It's the whole point he was there. He probably got a few million for that. But interested. And again, I think it just put a nice exclamation point on it. Austin gets the win. He's been double-crossed at every point of this. Typical angle, heel and face. He comes out, it's his first championship win, and even Tyson chins Shawn Michaels and turns face then and puts the 316 t-shirt on on Michaels, and everybody goes home a winner, don't they? So I think as a feel-good ending, perfect. I think it's the last two matches, and even Shamrock, so the last three matches save the pay-per-view for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, it considering how sort of flat this started, I was really happy with by the end. The second half is much better. From that sort of like that mixed tag team match, onwards, it gets better and better and better, and it really does
Yeah.
end up. It's a fun WrestleMania. I think it's an important, as you said though. I think it's an important WrestleMania. It's like a transitional one, isn't it? This is sort of like that real sort of like shift away from. It's like shedding the old school. Like there's bits and pieces still in there, but it's really starting to go away. So like by '99, like even by later into this year and into '99, like it's gone really. And obviously it's Austin's first championship and all that sort of stuff. It's good. I wouldn't say it's one of the. I wouldn't say it's like a top 5 or I don't know, top 10 manias maybe, but not top 5. But yeah, no, I'd definitely watch some of the matches in this again.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you. I think just for the end. I mean, I love like the Undertaker and Shamrocks, but I could watch Austin and Shawn Michaels. I could watch this match over and over. I think you'd still pick things up if you kept watching it a few times. I love it, absolutely love it. Again, but it's more for the. I think it's such a great event you've picked, Scott, for us to have a look at, and for me to come on as a guest. I'm really pleased that you've asked me to come on because this is so important in wrestling history. These moments like the WrestleMania 3, Hogan, Andre. It was supposed to be WrestleMania 6 when Warrior beat Hogan. That sort of fell on its arse. But these pivotal moments in wrestling, like when Hogan became a member of the NWO and turned from being a face that he'd been a face for like 8 or 9 years and run wrestling basically and become a millionaire, multi-millionaire. And then that is a massive moment in 96 of when he turned and became a member of the NWO. And this, I think, it's not there as someone says at the top of your head, what are the main moments? It's not even probably in the top 5, but it's a very, very important match because it created Mr. McMahon, it creates The Rock, it creates Stone Cold. And they're 3 things I think that it deserves a lot of credit for.
Oh yeah, I agree. This sort of this era or this section sort of this in this WrestleMania in particular, is giving birth to a lot of things. As you said, without sort of some of this stuff, you wouldn't have the Triple H that you get early 2000s. You like you said, this is the birth of sort of the Austin Championship era. You get in the Rock becoming the Rock, there's a weird interview bit in the lead up to the Rock Ken Shamrock match, and they show like an interview with the Rock where he's just being sort of like, if you were the president, no, he says if you ran WWE or WWF, and he says, oh well, he says, what if you were the boss? He says, oh, I think ruler is a better word, and he goes through and sort of talks about being sort of the ruler of the WWF. And it's sort of like the inkling, like, oh, okay, this is the Rock sort of like starting to let himself off the leash a little bit and do his thing, and you start to see it coming through. Yeah, this is it's an okay WrestleMania, but it's a really important one. I think you're right.
And also, just a quick one. I'm just reading Wikipedia as you're talking there, Scott. Is Cactus Jack and Cactus Jack and Terry Funk or Chainsaw Charlie lost the belts the next night because the New Age Outlaws said there was a stipulation that it wasn't the right dumpster that they lost the belts to. So it became a vacant title, which the New Age Outlaws won because they were now part of DX. And Chainsaw Charlie returned to being Terry Funk. And the next night, Cactus Jack became Dude Love. So I'm just like, I'll have to dig out that Raw just to watch it because it sounds utterly ridiculous. So I'm going to watch that.
I have to say, Mick Foley is one of my favorite. Him and Steve Austin are my 2 favorite wrestlers, and I think if you ever get a chance, there are certain books I think you read. You have to read it. Sort of, if you're a wrestling fan, there are certain ones to read, or at least in my opinion. And Mick Foley's first book, Have a Nice Day, is possibly one of the best biographies, and it covers all this sort of era and stuff. Have you ever read it?
No, I haven't. And now you're saying it, I'm going to have to dig it out.
Seriously good. I mean, it's really good. He's a funny guy anyway, but like his stories of like on the road stuff that goes on, especially when he was on the road sort of doing ECW and early WCW sort of stuff, when it was a bit looser and the stuff they got up to is crazy. But when he talks about some of the stuff they got, and Japan, when he talks about Japan, some of the death matches and stuff he did, highly recommend. It's called Blood and Sweat Socks. Mick Foley story, Blood and Sweat Socks. Very, very good.
I'll get on it.
I've really enjoyed this. This has been really good fun chatting about
Oh,
WrestleMania.
mate. Thank you, Scotty. I've loved it, mate.
No, thank you for coming on, Chris. I think we're gonna have to do some more because you say we've got our time with the WWE Network, so we're gonna have to choose a couple more. We might be trying to see if we can squeeze in 2 more for future reference. So I think what I'll do is let's choose. We've done a Mania, we've done a WrestleMania. So what are two? A SummerSlam? Should we try and do it? I'll get a SummerSlam. I'll do a poll on Twitter, and you like Rumbles, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's do a Rumble. I'll see if we can get a Rumble and a SummerSlam, and we'll do them.
Good man. Love it, mate.
Yeah,
Honestly, brilliant. Brilliant.
Right. Excellent, Chris. Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Top man, and thank you so much. And I hope I didn't cut you off too much, Scott. But when I get into Wrestling Zone, I genuinely go all in. Oh, amazing. I love the history of wrestling. So thank you so much for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it.
That's great. And I love everyone's got the passion for it. That's where the fun lies. So, I'll look forward to seeing what you've got to say about a Royal Rumble and a SummerSlam.
Good man.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Another great 20th Century Geek episode. Thank you for listening. If you would like to get in contact to suggest topics for future shows, or just chat about everything nerdy, you can email me at 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. That's 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. Or find me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Just search for 20th Century Geek. If you would like to support the show, please go on your podcast catcher and leave a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate it. It raises the show in the ranks and lets more people know about the podcast. If you want to show more support for the podcast, we do have an Amazon wish list. Just go on Amazon and search for 20th Century Geek, and you will find a list of books that will help with research for future podcasts. And don't forget, we love second-hand books in 20th Century Towers. Once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.